The way that we break down this segment is not upset predictions, because I think there's not a ton of skill in saying, well, hey, this team is a 3-touchdown dog, they're going to win this weekend. Like, if you're right on that, you're right on that, but there's a little bit of luck involved there, as we understand when it comes to picking games. I want to give you a forecast. So if you're planning a picnic and a potential upset would be the rain cloud, do you feel good about still having that picnic? These are the rain clouds we're about to break down right now. The first one has got to be South Carolina going to Texas A&M. South Carolina now 14.5-point dog going into College Station. Couple of factors to watch in this one. The first being it's Cocktober. All right, this is essentially the grand finale of Cocktober for South Carolina. We know what South Carolina is in October. They're a force to be reckoned with. South Carolina has been known to go on a tear against teams that they're not necessarily supposed to go on a tear against. Just ask Clemson, ask Tennessee from last year. The key to that is the Spencer Rattler heater effect. It could be a thing where Spencer Rattler walks out there on Saturday afternoon and just gets buckets. Like, that could be the difference maker. It's not overly novel analysis. It's pretty simplistic in nature, but we understand now with Spencer Rattler, there's always that potential that he just goes crazy. And with Texas A&M, we've seen now that pass defense has left something to be desired every now and then. We saw Jalen Milroe look like a Heisman candidate by nature of what he did in that game in College Station a few weeks ago. So keep an eye on that one. If they don't have the offensive output they need in this game, does Texas A&M? If they're kind of sleepwalking, if they're having trouble getting things going against South Carolina defensively, which would say something about South Carolina's effort defensively by nature of how they've played, South Carolina's going to score points. And if South Carolina scores points, this thing could get very interesting very, very quickly. Another game to look at here. Ohio State at Wisconsin. Now, you know me. I'm bought in on Ohio State to this point. We got to see him in person. I think the defense is elite. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is arguably the best player in college football. Not talking about best non-quarterback, best player in college football. I think he's a very real case for that. But when we look at the spot for Ohio State, to be real, y'all, I hate it. I hate this spot because you just had a huge win. Emotionally draining win over Penn State at the crib in Columbus. Now you got to go on the road, and there's a lot of factors that play into this game if you're Wisconsin, who's, again, a 14.5-point dog at home. You have that letdown spot. That's 1. 2, you're on the road, like I said. 3, you got the backup quarterback effect in this one. Braden Locke going to be starting for Wisconsin. Tanner Mordecai dinged up the hand. I don't believe he's going in this game. But when it comes to the backup quarterback effect, there's always that potential of kind of the element of surprise, because there's some tape on Braden Locke. He's played a few games now, but still, do you really know what he is as a quarterback? You don't have the same sample size that you would if a quarterback had played the entirety of the season to this point. So there's that going for you, and also the Luke Fickell effect. Luke Fickell, his alma mater is Ohio State. Now, that doesn't count for any points when you take the field on a Saturday, but I do think that says something about the maybe the it factor, the effort factor, if you will, from this Wisconsin coaching staff during the week. I'm just saying, a lot of things going into that one. Would not surprise me if Wisconsin were to push Ohio State just a little bit. If they can run the football up front, they're going to have a chance. And I specialize in I want to highlight the running the football part of this conversation, because for Wisconsin, 1, I think that's probably where they'll lean with Braden Locke being the quarterback in this game. Second part of that, Ohio State gave their all last weekend against Penn State. I mean, elite effort in the trenches. We knew it was a line of scrimmage game going into that matchup, but you wonder how much do they have left in the tank emotionally. I still think Ohio State wins this football game, but again, it would not surprise me if Wisconsin made it a little bit of an interesting game in that first half, maybe even early third quarter. I do think Ohio State eventually does pull away. Another letdown spot of sorts, you got Notre Dame welcoming Pitt to town. Pat Narduzzi and co. Now, you look at the record for Pitt, they're 2-5. Not great, but they're scrappy. 3 losses for Pitt have come by single digits. Okay, so they could very easily, I say very easily, they could in a lot of ways have a path to being 5-5. All that, or not 5-5. Yeah, that'd be 5-3, I suppose, at that point, or 5-2. Trying to do math on air, never a good idea. The bottom line, Pitt, I think, has a lot more in the tank than what they've shown to this point. Huge win for Notre Dame a couple of weeks ago against USC. Now, we saw this from Oklahoma and from Texas and from Washington. I want to highlight Oklahoma and Texas specifically. Have a big game. Oklahoma wins. Texas loses. Close game. Final drive. Whatever. Emotional game for both sides. Pretty draining. You would imagine it was draining for Notre Dame as well with that victory over USC. But then they had the bye week. We saw a big letdown from both those schools. Okay, so now we move into this part of the year. We move into this next game, rather, for Notre Dame. You wonder if there's any letdown. And if there is, going back to what we saw Pitt do against Louisville, I think they're good enough in some areas of this game to be able to make it interesting. Still like Notre Dame to win, still think they get it done, keep those picnic plans. But regardless, going back to what we were saying about Pitt, could very easily, there's a path for them being 5-2 instead of 2-5 with those 3 losses by single digits. Now, speaking of Texas, they got BYU coming to town. Talking about coaches in their alma maters with Luke Fickell and Ohio State. Steve Sarkisian went to BYU. Go ahead and YouTube the highlights of Steve Sarkisian throwing the pill around the yard, and dude could sling that thing. Now, for BYU, they are 18.5-point dogs, but there will be no Quinn Ewers in this football game. The early part of this game will be huge. More than likely, Malik Murphy going to be the guy starting for Texas in this football game, according to Bobby Burton of Inside Texas. And I think Malik Murphy is super talented, but there's still that potential for that first start kind of jitters. And with those first start jitters, we've seen this a couple of times from quarterbacks, those first start mistakes. If he does have that first start mistake early in this game, to what degree is that mistake? Is it like hey, I missed that read and missed that throw high on a third down, so we had to punt? Or is it, hey, I left that throw inside on the out route and they ran it back for 6, and now we're down 7-0 trying to play comeback at the house against a BYU team that's fired up and has some momentum right now? Very different scenarios, a lot of what-ifs baked into that, but that's what we do whenever we have some upsets being talked about when it comes to upset prediction or upset forecast on our Thursday show. Georgia, Florida. Now, it's funny that we're talking about this in the upset category because I think a lot of people, with just the nature of this being a rivalry game, you kind of take the logic file and delete that from the hard drive when it comes to a game like this. This is going to be the kitchen sink from Florida. We understand that. We're all on the same page here. Austin Armstrong, we talked about it in one of our breakdowns of this game early. It's like hey, we're going to risk it for the biscuit defensively is how I would go about it. I think they're going to be aggressive. I don't think they'll try and play Florida straight up. So a lot of pressure then goes on Carson Beck and this offense to be able to diagnose that, sift through that with no Brock Bowers, and be able to score points. So what I want to make sure we talk about when it comes to the upset factor in this game, to me, it's all about the first half. Because Georgia, we've seen them have some issues kind of starting slow. Vanderbilt got up 7-0. We've seen them get down to Auburn, saw them get down to South Carolina. Like Georgia, at times, has taken a little bit to get the fire lit, if you will. For Florida, that plays directly into their hands because I think they'll, 1, come out swinging, and 2, if Florida can play with a lead in this game and control the tempo in any facet of this game and have some belief by how they play in the first half, I think things get really interesting. Now, we already made our prediction on Georgia to win that football game, but I'm just saying, keep an eye on the first half of that game. That's going to dictate a lot of what Florida has to do, what you ask Graham Mertz to do, and will tell us a lot about where Georgia's at without Brock Bowers at this point in time. Last one I want to talk about, you'll notice kind of a beefy slate here when it comes to the upset forecast. Kind of a beefy slate. Clemson at NC State. NC State is a 10-point dog at home. 1, this is a rivalry. I want to make sure we'll say that. They do not like each other at all. 2nd, this is a homecoming for NC State. How disrespected do you have to feel if you're Clemson and NC State has got you for homecoming? Got to feel some disrespect there. Now, I also want to say this to NC State. They get a whole bye week before this game. So they've had a whole extended period of time now, 2 weeks essentially, to prep for Clemson. So they'll have it dialed in. And I think there's a lot of questions to be asked about Clemson. Like, say what you want about NC State, what they do or don't have, how they do or don't match up with what Clemson has on that roster. Like, Clemson just got knocked down last week, emotional loss against Miami. Where is Clemson? Where is Clemson? It feels like they are maybe not free-falling, but they're getting very close to that territory of us, like not even recognizing what they are anymore. So a win over NC State could kind of stabilize things a little bit if you're Clemson, but I'm just saying that's one that I'm watching. And that 10-point number at home for NC State, curious about that. So a lot to watch this week when it comes to the upset forecast. We told you last week it was kind of a slim slate, if you will, to potential upsets. This week, I think there's a lot to watch and a lot to be excited about when you're kind of keeping track of that ticker on Saturday afternoon. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.